I was driving in Beverly Hills and the sun was shining in my eyes and I was turning and I almost hit a pedestrian who slammed their hands down on my hood and said, "Watch where you're going." And I just stopped and I looked and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? I almost killed somebody. I'm chasing the $150 phantom thong that I already know for a fact doesn't exist anymore because the company shut down like a year ago in France. And so I was like, I have more to offer in life than this. There's got to be more that I can offer. And that's when I started looking at something else that I can do in film where I could contribute. And I knew the power of film in my own life, having seen movies that changed my life and still to this day are, I watch a little scene from them to bring me back to they're my beacon. So started Indieflix with my good friend Carlo, and the rest is history.
Brian Smith here, and welcome to the Dreampath podcast, where I try to get inside the heads of talented creatives from all over the world. My goal is to demystify and humanize the creative process and make it accessible to everyone. Now let's jump in. Scilla Andreen is on the show today. Scilla is an American filmmaker, award-winning producer, director, and Emmy-nominated costume designer. She is also CEO and co-founder of Indieflix, a global entertainment screening and subscription streaming service based in Seattle. Indieflix produces and distributes social impact films and series to create positive change in the world. Scilla is also a popular speaker at the Sundance, Cannes, and South by Southwest film festivals, and we talk about her experience at these festivals over the last 20 years during our interview. Scilla started her Hollywood career as a costume designer on some of the most popular shows on television, including The Wonder Years, starring Fred Savage, Dawson's Creek, Party of Five, Jack and Jill, and What I Like About You with Amanda Bynes. Scilla's most recent films include the documentaries Angst, about how anxiety is plaguing our nation's youth, Like, about the problems social media is causing, and Upstanders, about cyberbullying. I watched all three of these films during the interview and found them to be powerful, compelling, and important for purposes of not just educating viewers, but creating an opening for a dialogue with family, teachers, and students. The next film of Scilla's I hope to see soon is Nevertheless, which covers sexual harassment, gender-based violence, privilege, and toxic masculinity. It was a lot of fun talking to Scilla at the Indieflix headquarters in Seattle. She's such a natural storyteller with so much charisma that it was hard for me to stop recording. I just wanted to keep going and hearing her perspective on the arts, filmmaking, the joys of working with millennials, the important role that film festivals play, and so many other fun topics. So let's jump right into my chat with Scilla Andreen. Scilla Andreen, thank you for being on the podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, Brian.
Yeah, so we're here in your office in Seattle on a beautiful body of water. What lake is this?
Lake Washington.
Lake Washington. And we're here with photographer Sarah Shannon. We are doing social distancing the best we can in the middle of this pandemic and hopefully toward the end of the pandemic. We're here to talk about your career. And why don't you just start off by telling us what Indieflix is? Because we're in the headquarters, apparently, of Indieflix.
Yeah, the global headquarters. And isn't it an amazing
Oh my gosh,
space?
It is gorgeous here. Yeah, I mean, so the listeners can understand what we're looking at. We're on Lake Washington, and we are overlooking the lake and a dock. And it's hard to describe. I'll put pictures on the website, but it's so beautiful. This location, I can't imagine a more inspiring, peaceful, meditative location to have like a film company.
That's a perfect segue because it is inspiring and healing. And I will say there have been many hills and valleys growing Indieflix as a global streaming service and now a screening distribution service of offline community events. But the highs and the lows and whether it's when the world economy's in the toilet or a pandemic or a strike or whatever is going on in the world, it's really nice to be able to look out at Mother Nature, to look at Mount Rainier, to look at Lake Washington, and it calms me and it keeps me pretty much focused on what I need to do. So I don't get caught up. If I were in a cubicle, I probably would have, I don't know. Yeah. I wouldn't have made it, I don't think. So Indieflix is a global subscription-based streaming service and screening distribution service. Basically, think of it as two pieces, which actually think of it now, we've evolved. We're really like three legs of the stool. The three legs of the stool are We have a streaming subscription service. We have the offline community booking service of social impact films. And then we also create original content now. And that's new. And we're going to be creating a lot more original content. And so the stuff that goes out into the schools and corporations and screens for existing communities is kind of our version of a theatrical. And the global streaming service is what you can watch. And we have like 5,300 titles, shorts, features, documentaries, web series of content for a purpose.
So is it a fair comparison to say that Indieflix is the equivalent of Netflix, but just on an independent, sort of an indie film, educational film slant?
Yeah. I mean, put it this way. Up until about 2 years ago, we were sort of the Netflix of independent film. But 2 years ago, we had over 12,000 titles, and I pretty much sloughed off about 7,000 plus titles because I really wanted to be content for a purpose, movies that matter. And of course, all movies matter, right? Like depending on the reason why the filmmaker made it and for the audience. Even horror has a reason for being, right?
Yeah.
But I really wanted to focus on content that opened up conversations, made us more aware of things on a social level, created conversation. I wanted something where people would watch and then want to talk about it, or it reflected something that's going on in the world to maybe make someone feel not so alone. And so I decided to pivot to focus on that. There's no point in trying to compete with Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, HBO, Disney Plus, Apple TV, like
right.
All of those. It's like, I love all of those. I'm a subscriber. I watch all my favorite shows on different places. So I basically turned the brand around about 2 years ago to be content for independent thinkers.
Okay.
And so that helped me open it up to be not just indies, but also edutainment-focused content, social impact, social justice, branded content, experimental content from film schools that focused on climate change, or, like it to me, it had more focus.
Yeah. It's interesting because it seems like, as a layperson who's not in the industry, if I had 7,000 titles in my library, to let that go seems like it would be really hard for me to do.
It was really, really hard. And I think a lot of people thought I'd lost it. And because, for so many years, it was kind of an arms race with title count, especially with worldwide rights, which was really hard to get. We fought really hard and worked really hard to get those titles on our platform. And I was, managing and working with the team to keep all of those filmmakers happy, which can be really challenging because, they put their content up on different platforms and they're like, where's the money? Like, show me the money.
Okay.
But, you have to be out there promoting it. You have to, and the market is saturated.
Yeah.
And so then they're like, where's my money? It's been on your platform. It's like, have you been marketing it? Well, have you? And it's like, well, we have 12,000 titles. It's hard for us to market your movie. Our model was based on you marketing your movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that kind of is a rule of thumb for any platform, including Netflix and Hulu and Amazon. Even though you go up on those platforms, you still need to promote your content for people to know where to find it.
That's interesting. It sounds like then just having the titles that in and of itself it's great, but then there's a burden that comes with that, or a responsibility that you have to weigh the pros and the cons of having that additional content out there. And also, I think I noticed in one of your social media posts, an Instagram post in the background, there was, not that I'm stalking you on social media, but one of your most recent posts, you had a Seth Godin book. And I listened to Seth Godin, his Akimbo podcast, and he talks about this concept of the smallest viable audience that you should be seeking to obtain and retain, your smallest viable audience, which is sort of counterintuitive for someone who wants to be out there and be seen and be heard, and you have this platform. But the counterintuitive part for me is you're narrowing the scope of what your mission is, which I think takes a lot of wisdom to do and discipline, because otherwise, if you just go in like I just want to be everything to everybody, you're going to be nothing to everybody.
No, that's exactly right. When I sloughed off those titles, when I had to let filmmakers know that because of the new mandate that I had implemented of content for a purpose and wanting to sort of occupy this edutainment space, a lot of them were really upset with me. They were like, F you, you're like abandoning the indie filmmaker. And it's just like, look, if I don't make a change also, we won't be here. Because I can't come out there and present ourselves as your source for independent film when we don't have the latest films from Sundance and Cannes and Toronto and Telluride, and because Amazon, Netflix, and Hulu are paying $8 to $10 million for those films. And the general public, while they love going to film festivals and they like seeing the films in the festival, they don't particularly want to stream them. They want to go there for the festival experience. And if there's one thing I've learned is I've learned about the human condition in being a CEO. That is the number one thing I've learned. Filmmakers are, I just thought, oh my gosh, I so naively thought I'm going to hang a shingle, start Indieflix with my producing partner, Carlo, who actually stepped back 6 months after we've started it because he's like, I'm a theater guy. I can't see the audience. This isn't for me. But the filmmakers were like, I don't know. I don't want to put my content online. That's how long we've been around. We were DVD on demand in the early days.
Oh, wow.
And then we've evolved, download own, progressive download, streaming, movie club. We've done a lot of different iterations of getting audiences to come in and to watch content. But it's really hard to compete with the big guys. And since we've made this move, it's been game changing. I mean, people know who we are. They know what to expect. The content that gets submitted is amazing. And we're still working on cleaning up the library to be even more focused on content for a purpose and what that really means.
Yeah.
We have classics on there and people are like, how is that content for a purpose? It's like, we have a decent sized footprint abroad and they love the classics and they think it's good for you. It's pretty innocent content. And so we've left that up there. So, the transition is always tough, especially when you have so much content and so many filmmakers. And it was really controversial. People were really, really, as I said, really angry. And now they've gotten over it. Thankfully, there are hundreds of streaming platforms out there.
Oh, yeah.
That they can go on. So not being on Indieflix is not going to hurt them.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. And I would imagine that there are tons of filmmakers who want to get into filmmaking, and maybe edutainment, is that what you call it?
Uh-huh.
Edutainment is a way to do that. It's an opening that's maybe a little more accessible for them. But the problem that they probably have seen historically is, how do you make money from that? How do you monetize a 30-minute documentary when you don't have access to studio executives, Netflix, made for Netflix projects? And your company provides an answer to that, or a solution, because the content there, it sounds like it's going out to schools, and schools are subscribing and are using this to teach their students about really current, important subjects.
Yeah, schools are utilizing the content on the site to teach or to just have conversation. But then we also have the whole other side of the business, which is where we book films into schools that screen, like an assembly or an evening screening or in a boardroom of a corporation. And they might sell tickets, and they'll have, anywhere from 20 people to 1,800 or 2,000 people. And then they might screen it in every single classroom. So 3,000 kids will watch it, plus their parents on an evening screening during the course of a week.
So how does that work from a subscription standpoint? Is a school able to subscribe under a certain type of subscription where they can just play it to all of their students without worrying about the cost per student? Or do you actually charge per student or per classroom, or what is the monetization?
It's a license fee.
Okay.
It's outside of the subscription service, which is $4.99 a month or $39 a year. When you are using what we call the distribution lab, it's a completely separate license and it's for completely separate content. So the content that we take out into schools is kind of like newer content. So it is not available on the streaming service. And sometimes people get frustrated by that. They're like, well, why can't I just subscribe and watch Angst or or The Upstanders or Finding Kind or Empowerment Project on Indieflix? And it's because there is no conversation. So the whole point of having these, school screenings basically is that then you have a conversation, and when an existing community witnesses each other watching a film, whether it's about anxiety and depression, or it's about empowerment, equality, bullying, social media addiction, then you establish that community as a safe place to talk about it. And you start sharing information and resources, and then it starts to evolve and you actually have an impact with your film. So the film is just a tool to open up the conversation.
Yeah.
And when you have it on the streaming service, not that many people are going to watch it, or they might watch it, but then there's no one to have conversation with. And so it doesn't have sort of that therapeutic effect or impact.
Yeah.
And if we were to have any of these films down at the, AMC or Lincoln Theaters, no one's going to go down there to watch a movie about mental health. We could certainly put it up on PBS and all the PBS watchers will watch it, but there's still no conversation that's being had. So having these old-fashioned, face-to-face, human being before COVID-19 and social distancing, we gathered in auditoriums and we watched concerts and we watched movies and we got together. And the schools it was an amazing venue to bring community together.
Yeah, and that's what I noticed about watching Angst and Like and Upstanders. Watching them alone is great. I mean, because they're very well done, high production value, important, very current. But without that conversation, it isn't having the impact probably that it was meant to have.
And didn't you want to talk to somebody?
Yeah, and I had a family member that I wanted to talk to about Angst, and it is a perfect segue, I think, into difficult subjects.
Yeah, it's modeling it for you, how to have the conversation. You know, when you tell a kid, well, just speak up, they're like, what do I say?
Yeah.
Right? Or this is my favorite. I was told this growing up, follow your passion. I'm like, well, I like to watch TV. I like to ride my bike. I like, what does that mean? Follow your passion. Or here's another good one. Just be you.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, if I were me and someone knew how I was feeling right now, they would never hire me.
Yeah.
Or they would never, they wouldn't want to be my friend because I don't feel good right now. So how do we break that down? And I think movies are really good at that because it kind of can model it and then you can feel it. And when both those are happening, that's something you can remember and act on.
Yeah. It was neat to see the students or young people brought in to be subjects in these films because they are experiencing the same things that our kids are experiencing, but they're articulating them in a very vulnerable way. And so I think our kids, when they see them, are going to be like, okay, so there's other people out there who are feeling what I'm feeling, but they're saying it at least. And then you have the adults like in the movie or the film Angst, who are acknowledging their insensitivity or their lack of understanding and empathy for the situation. Because if you don't have anxiety, for instance, talking about angst, and I've been very lucky to have, everybody has anxiety to a certain degree, but the diagnosable anxiety that stops you in your tracks.
The disorder.
Basically, the DSM anxiety. If you don't have that level of anxiety, there's no way for you to really understand what they're going through. And then the danger of that dynamic is that the person who doesn't have anxiety, usually the adult who is judging the child, is going to be imposing expectations on them that are just not realistic, which creates havoc in a family. So that was nice to see played out. Another thing I like about those films is they come in under an hour. Now, when I'm looking at any type of content online, I'm looking at what is the commitment here?
Yeah. Well, because that's your investment, is your time.
Right.
I'm the same. If someone says, oh, can you watch this real quick? It's only 16 minutes. I'm like, oh my God, that's a quarter of an hour. How do I carve that? I mean, and right now I'm kind of crazy busy, but so that feels long to me.
Yeah.
I'll watch something that's like 3 minutes I can do. But when you start to get into 7 and 8 minutes, that's a bigger chunk of time.
Yeah.
Isn't that awful?
It is awful. Yeah. My kids, every morning, they have to show me all of the TikToks that they've gathered from the night before. And it's like, okay, I need to sit down and I need to look at these TikToks.
But they're kind of fun, aren't they?
TikToks are,
at least they're entertaining.
I have to admit, the ones they pick out are really worth watching. Usually.
Yeah, they're cute.
Yeah. It's interesting how our culture is shifting in these various directions toward very specific types of content delivered in this way.
I'm curious how long TikTok will last.
Yeah, well, Vine, I don't know what happened with Vine, but Vine was kind of a similar
loved Vine
type of thing. I don't
too
know.
Early for its time.
Yeah, but then you've got the security concerns with TikTok because it's a Chinese company.
But the kids don't care about that.
No, they don't.
They don't. Just like when I was telling them that Snapchat may not necessarily delete your snaps, and they were like, "Oh, okay."
Yeah.
No, they were sort of like, "Oh, okay." I'll just keep doing it.
So, are you in a place right now where in your career, that narrative films are not where you're going and probably will not end up in the next 10 years? Or are you thinking about narrative films in your future?
Totally. I mean, I come from the narrative world. That's where I started.
That's right. Yeah,
and
with the television.
In features and then television. I did The Wonder Years and Party of Five and Dawson's Creek. I was the costume designer. And so I grew up in episodic television. And I also, did feature films. I was a Warner Brothers and Sony girl. So to be so heavily immersed in the doc world is newer for me, but I love it. I mean, it's definitely a place I'll stay, but I long to get back to my roots. So I very much plan to create narrative content as well. However you can best tell a story is what I want to tell and what I want to support in other people's content.
Yeah. When I was at Sundance this year, I was on the red carpet a few times asking actors about television versus film. And I got the same answer every time. I mean, usually the question was like, what do you prefer, television versus film? And everyone said the same thing. I don't care. There's no difference for me.
Yeah.
It's all about the story. If I'm able to tell a story, that's where I am.
Well, what I love about television is that you get to know your characters and you get to stay with them, whereas a movie is a one-off.
Yeah.
And unless there's sequels, you don't get to see them again. So, do I want to make episodic television about homelessness, empowerment, quality, bullying, resilience, connection, community? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If that can come through and inspire people to be their best selves or to push out of their comfort zone, to be kinder to someone else because it's reflected in some entertaining piece of content, I'm in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I've noticed about television as well. And starting with, for me anyway, the television series that was the game changer was Sopranos, where you have these character arcs that last an entire season or an entire series, 7 or 8 seasons. And that type of storytelling where it's slow, it's methodical, and you really get invested in those characters. That's why I think for me, television is where it's at.
Television's where it's at, but I will tell you that I go up to this sort of 70,000 foot level because I want to be a platform that just, it's oversimplifying, but that does good in the world. I want to have content that people can go, we have more titles than Netflix does right now. So it isn't about size. It isn't about volume of titles. It's about, there's probably a tipping point of content, a number of titles you have to have in order to be, refreshing it, and it's enough for masses to come and watch. But what I also really want is for, when I was thinking about this the other night, people who watch Netflix or streaming services, I think are generally probably a little bit healthier than people who watch TV and are bombarded with all the pharmaceutical ads that we get every other ad. It's like there is either some condition or disorder that is going on that you might have. So there's a pill you can take.
Right.
And I'm just thinking, you don't see any of that on streaming services.
Yeah.
So you're not being programmed. Like they call it programming for a reason, right? You're not being programmed with all this stuff that makes you feel like, I've watched this woman with a woman who's going like this and there's a little wind up thing on her back. I'm like, that's me. Maybe I have that because I'm so tired. And then you realize I'm just tired.
Yeah.
Maybe just a day off would be good, or a walk in the park, or, some sleep.
Well, I think it's important too to be intentional about how you spend your time and what you watch. And that's what's nice about Netflix and Hulu and Indieflix, where you go in and there is at least a certain degree of intentionality to what you're doing. Mm-hmm. And you're being inundated with like, hey, what about this? And based upon your interests, you may like this. That's great. But yeah, the network television experience for me, I have not been part of the network television culture for 10 years probably.
Oh, you were an early cord cutter?
Yeah, I haven't been doing that.
See, I have it all because I feel like I have to have it all so that I understand what's going on as I can comment on the landscape. But it is, I will say, since COVID-19 hit, the ads have never been better. You know how the Super Bowl, do you watch the Super Bowl ads at least?
Yeah.
Right, so we still all watch those.
Oh, sure.
Because they're entertainment in themselves, right? The ads right now are just people being people, and they're taking from Zoom and the Skype and the all the ways that people are connecting.
Yeah.
And shaping those stories and having these ads. And they're they make you feel it's about people, it's about transparency, it's about caring. And that brand is associating themselves with caring. And, I just feel like, wow, what a great opportunity. I hope that it stays that way. Sure, entertain us too. Like we need that too. But I love the shift. And it's not about, I'm going to sell you something.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting. I talked to an advertising. I never thought on this podcast that I would interview someone from the advertising world, but one of my good friends from high school, his older brother is like this superstar in the ad world, and he has an office in London and Seattle. His name's Jim Haven. And if you are interested, look at jimhaven.com at his website. The portfolio is amazing. But his commercials are like, when you refer to his work as a commercial, you almost feel like you're insulting him. He doesn't take it personally at all. He'll call it a commercial. But these are not commercials. These are stories that are being told, and they're intimate, they're personal, they're real, they're authentic, and they're engaging. And that's the type of storytelling anybody likes to see, whether it's in a commercial or a television series or a movie.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, I think even when BMW a long time ago did some sort of campaign, and it got Guy Ritchie, the director, and a couple of other hot directors to do these little spots for BMW and have kind of a story and a super high action production value, super polished and slick. We were all like, oh my God, that's so great, because they're crossing over. But the thing is like you said, all we want to do is tell our stories. And it doesn't matter what the running time is, and it doesn't matter if it's a feature or TV or a documentary or whatever it is, even if it's just on your phone, right? On an Instagram TV thing or IGTV. Tell your story, tell it well, and be engaging. Now everybody can tell their stories. Look at TikTok. I mean, like, it's awesome. I love it. The gatekeepers are like, it's becoming a little bit blended there.
It really is. And sometimes you'll see YouTube stars, that's their CV. That's their resume. I'm a YouTube star, but now I'm on television or in a movie. And same thing with TikTok and Vine stars. I think people got their start in Vine. There are people that got their start in Vine, and now they're in the acting world or in entertainment world in some way. I think commercials are often treated unfairly by artists because there's a lot of artistry in commercial work and a lot of great storytelling in commercials.
Oh, yeah. And it's selling.
Yeah, it's true.
They know the psychological things to hit too.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, I know if I'm crying during a commercial, it's like, this is this is pretty powerful stuff.
Oh, yeah.
To make me cry in like 30 seconds or a minute. As I get older, it's just easier and easier to do.
Yeah.
I cry more than my wife does, I'm sure. But so how did you find Hollywood? I looked at your background, and you started at NYU, and then you found your way to television and film in Hollywood, and you were down in Los Angeles for quite some time. Tell us how that happened. So
I was at NYU studying political science because I wanted to be a litigator. I love the law. In fact, it's funny, during COVID-19, like when I can't sleep, I watch old Perry Mason episodes, relive my childhood. But I fell in love with the director while attending NYU, and I ended up dropping out and working on commercials and industrials with him, and made a lot of money. And that was really great for a starving student. And I never went back. I then went to see my mom, who had moved to LA, and she used to be an actress. So she was down there, and started a little casting company. And I ended up getting on a little independent film there that I did the costuming and styling out of the trunk of my car, and then kind of went on to another movie. And then I got the Wonder Years as iconic and worked with some of the best actors, writers, directors, and producers in the business, and just kind of, went to different shows working with my tribe. And we all kind of grew up in the business together. And then I was doing my first sitcom called What I Like About You with Amanda Bynes and Jenny Garth and Leslie Grossman. And I don't know, I was wrapping up that show, and I was working on a big Disney pilot with an actress that I won't name, who's from a huge show. And she had me running around looking for this $150 thong. Oh, no. And she was playing just a suburban mom who wore jeans and a sweatshirt. Sorry, because you were a costume designer in that business, and right? I said, you actually don't, but I would produce and direct short films and feature films during my hiatus. Okay. I was hired to do the job because I was known for working really well. I worked really well with difficult people, kids and animals. And so I was like, okay. And I was driving in Beverly Hills. I had already tried to find this $150 thong. The company did not exist anymore. I'd offered to build it. She wanted that brand, that thong to wear under her jeans, which, by the way, she never took her jeans off. Like it was never ever, it was just for her to have. Yeah. And I couldn't find it. And I was driving in Beverly Hills, and the sun was shining in my eyes, and I was turning, and I almost hit a pedestrian who slammed their hands down on my hood and said, "Watch where you're going." And I just stopped, and I looked, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing with my life? I almost killed somebody. I'm chasing the $150 phantom thong that I already know for a fact doesn't exist anymore because the company shut down like a year ago in France. And so I was like, I have more to offer in life than this. There's got to be more that I can offer. And that's when I started looking at something else that I can do in film where I could contribute. And I knew the power of film in my own life having seen movies that changed my life and still to this day are, I watch a little scene from them to bring me back to they're my beacon. So started Indieflix with my good friend Carlo, and the rest is history.
Well, what a cinematic moment that is, where they slam their hands on your hood and they tell you something that's almost prophetic, like watch where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
And what they mean at the moment is literally watch where you're going, don't hit me. But you're interpreting it as sort of this cosmic message.
Yeah.
Really watch where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a cool story.
Yeah. It was the pivotal moment for me. And then I dreamt about the name Indieflix. I dreamt that I was in New York. I was at some fabulous apartment with like floor to ceiling windows. I always dream like a filmmaker. And I was sitting down on this sort of like beautiful leather pillowy thing on the floor next to this fireplace, looking out. I think it was at Central Park South, because I could see all of Central Park. And I hear someone say, "Oh, have you met Scilla? She has a company called Indieflix." And I go, "Oh my God, I love Indieflix." And so I stand up out of frame and talk to whoever it is. And I woke up and I went to, in those days, I think it was Network Solutions or something. And I put it in and it was available and it was expensive, but I bought it. And then I went to work at Warner Brothers. And I said, "I have the name of my company. It's called Indieflix." And they were like, "Oh, I've heard of you." And I said, "No, you couldn't have heard of me because I just bought it. And we don't exist." They're like, "Yeah, you're the Netflix of independent film." And I was like, this was when they were doing DVD.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was like, wow, they've already heard of us. And then people were saying, "You can't do that. Netflix will sue you." And so I said, well, if I'm going to get sued, I better get sued right now. So I emailed Reed Hastings, who sent back to me, goes, "No, I think it's great. Good luck.
Yeah,
hang in there.
No trademark infringement there.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and I still will send him things occasionally and he'll respond and say, "I like it." I made a commercial once called Keeping My Netflix. And I got my friends and my family and my neighbors and everyone who worked for Indieflix and cleared out my living room and filmed this little ad called "I'm Keeping My Netflix." And everyone's like, "Keeping my Netflix, keeping my Netflix." And then they said, "But I'm adding Indieflix because," and then all the reasons why to add Indieflix.
Oh, that's brilliant, because you can't fight that type of momentum. So why not just hop on that wave?
Right. And why would you? I wouldn't want to give up Netflix. Are you kidding?
No.
And I sent that to Reed and he's like, "Oh, cute. I like it."
As you may have noticed, there are great resources and advice mentioned in all our episodes. And for many of them, we actually collect all of these resources for you in one easy place: our newsletter. You can go to dreampathpod.com/newsletter to join. It's not fancy, just an email about each week's episode, featured artists, and resources to help you on your journey. Now, back to the interview. That's great. Well, let's go back to the Wonder Years, because that's one of the first television series that I remember from, it was my late teens, I think, but really falling in love with characters.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just...
Winnie Cooper.
Yeah, Winnie and what's the main character's name?
Kevin Arnold, Fred Savage.
Fred Savage's character, yeah. But these are characters that you're just so rooting for. And the period part of it, too, I think was pretty unique. I don't think that had been done in television up to that point.
Well, I mean, there was like Happy Days and stuff like that.
Well, that's true. Yeah, but not in this dramatic way that I had ever seen. I'd seen it in sitcoms. But I loved those characters. I loved the series. Did you at the time know how special it was when you were doing the costume design?
100%. I actually did not do the pilot. I came on first episode. I saw the pilot. They aired it after Super Bowl Sunday. And I watched it and it's like Cupid shot an arrow through my whole being. Like I became obsessed and I had to work on that show, and I tracked down where they were shooting and I went down there and I said, "Can I work here?" And they were like, "No, and we're not hiring." And I kept saying, "I'll do anything. I will sweep floors. I will do anything." And they were like, "No." And I kept going back. And like the fourth or fifth time I went back, and I'd bring cookies and I'd be like anything. I was shameless. And I'm not that way, actually. This was out of character for me. But I'd never had a show that I wanted to be a part of so badly. And the designer at the time was standing in the hallway when I came in, and she said, "Well, I can use you. You can sort hangers for me and clean up the wardrobe room." And I said, "Great." And so I did that, and I did it so fast. She thought it was going to take me like, I don't know, a couple weeks. She wanted me to organize every single article of clothing with like racks and racks of clothes, of 60s clothing. And so I organized and tagged and sized everything in like 3 or 4 days. And so then she gave me more things to do. And I ended up becoming her assistant. And then she got fired. So they brought in someone else, and I started training her and getting her ready, whatever. And she didn't like it. So she left. And they said, we're going to find someone else. We're going to need you to train them too. And I said, just give it to me. And they said, well, no, because we need someone who's lived in that time period. And I said, are you kidding me? How do you think they made Ben-Hur and, like some of the old movies or even like sci-fi, like Star Wars? I mean, you can't have lived in a time period to be able to costume design or art design or set design anything. And so they were like, but you're so young, because I was early 20s.
Yeah.
And I said, I got this. Look, I've carried 2 other designers. I can do this. So they did. And then I said, just give me a couple episodes. If you're not happy, I'll train someone else. And so I took over the show. And then my producer called, I don't know, at some point and said, oh, congratulations on your Emmy. And I didn't even know what an Emmy was. It's like, what is an Emmy for costume design?
It's only the best award ever.
But I didn't win. Beauty and the Beast won.
Yeah.
But it was fun being nominated and going to the show and everything.
Was that your first like awards experience where you're there on the red carpet? And that must be cool. Yeah.
That whole thing, that was a whole nother night where I didn't know that my husband got car sick. So ABC and New World had sent a limo and we got in the car and I'm like, this is so exciting. And he's like throwing up because he has to be driving. Otherwise he gets car sick.
Oh.
So he ended up sitting up front with the driver and I sat in the back and it was a whole thing.
So what kind of relationships did you develop in that television series that resulted in other opportunities?
Oh, I mean, all my shows. Because they all, people would break away from a show and go to different shows. And I mean, sometimes it was almost like a tug of war. No, come do mine. No, come do mine. And so that's how I then went on to Party of Five. And I did the pilot of Dawson's Creek. I did not go and do the whole series. I did the first couple episodes and got a local crew trained up there and then handed off the show. I didn't want to move to North Carolina.
Yeah.
And then Smallville, I went up and actually that was more like a kind of a come in and not fix, but there were some issues. And so I was sort of the person to go in and sort of set the boat, right the ship. And then, so then when it came down to I did another show called Jack and Jill, which was really fun with Amanda Peet and Justin Kirk and Ivan Sergey and Sarah Paulson.
Sarah Paulson's amazing.
She's unbelievable. And Sarah Paulson and Amanda Peet are just the best of friends. And they were just a hoot to work with. And that was a great show to work on. It was so fun. Then before I went on to my first sitcom with Amanda Bynes and Jenny Garth, I got offered 6 Feet Under.
Oh.
And I was just like, yes, this is so good. And my kids were like, please do Amanda Bynes. Because she was like the Miley Cyrus at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I was just like, I'm not going to do a sitcom. I'm a, episodic girl.
Yeah.
I ended up somehow accepting that one. And my whole crew who comes with me everywhere I go, they're like, do a sitcom. We won't work, 18-hour days. We'll have a much easier schedule. And so I said, okay, fine. And I did a sitcom and I didn't realize you have a life. It's the only show you can do in the industry where you actually can have a life.
Right.
Because you only shoot, 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
And you get a hiatus.
Yeah.
So it was really fun, but it was hard to turn that down.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then to look at where that show went. I mean, that's like one of the first HBO series that really kind of was a game changer, I think.
Yeah.
Like one of the Sopranos types of series. But like we do in life, when you look back on Crossroads, if you had taken that path as opposed to...
I wouldn't have started Indieflix.
Yeah, you wouldn't be where you are today.
It opened up my life to be able to come up with something else to do.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any... People don't always love when I say this, especially in my family, but they're all accustomed to it now. I think that every time something is challenging or hard, that means that the opportunity is even greater.
Mm-hmm.
And that every single thing that happens in your life is happening for a really good reason, not just a reason, but a really good reason. You can choose to take away just a reason or no reason, but I choose to think that everything is happening for a really great reason. We have to pay attention. We have to be present.
Yeah, well, I've heard that sentiment before. It's like nothing worthwhile comes easy.
I don't like that saying.
Nothing that has ever been worthwhile for me has ever come easy, except for my kids. That was pretty easy, having kids.
So you've already just blown that out of the water. I don't believe that one. The whole no pain, no gain. Like, why do I have to go through pain to gain? That is really negative programming. I don't like that. You know what? I think it's better to say, sometimes there's pain.
Yeah.
And you can still gain.
You can push through it and still get there.
If we can turn the dials and change the way we view things, right? This one really killed me in the early days was that, what was it? One of the greatest characteristics of patience, right? You got to have patience. It's like, why? I could be waiting forever. Can't I just go after something? Why do I have to be patient?
Right.
That's like saying wait.
Well, when I first, you wanted to be a litigator before you became a filmmaker, and I actually am a litigator. So that's my day job. I'm a trial lawyer.
Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
I think you chose the right path, but definitely. But my boss, when he first hired me, was saying, you need to pay your dues. This is all about paying your dues. You need to be the first one here, the last one to leave. You need to work Saturdays. I don't even care what you're doing on Saturdays, as long as I drive by and I see your car, it's here. And I bought into that bullshit.
Yeah. But I think there's some truth to having experience under your belt.
No, that's true. As long as the paying your dues part.
He was just getting some extra work out of you for nothing.
Right. But as long as when you're paying your dues, you're doing meaningful work. And you're putting in your 10,000 hours, your Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours, then I think that's fine. I think that's a good
You're also
paradigm.
you're proving you're a team player.
Right. Yeah, because I think the work ethic this is, I don't want to offend Sarah, who is part of this generation, but the younger generations, they're not buying into first one to work, last one to leave, working weekends, no matter what. They're more into, I'll work hard, but I'm not going to just do it for show. So their values are different than I think the older generations are. And we're trying to accommodate that. But I think that's a good thing for our culture, that they're basically saying, I'm not going to be part of this bullshit anymore.
Can I tell you that I work with a lot of millennials, a lot of women, a lot of millennials. My mother works with me. She's, pushing 80. And so we kind of run the gamut of age ranges and diversity. The millennials have taught me so much. I think it is the reason I'm still in business, because they're not as, some of my friends say, oh, they're so entitled. I'm like, actually, they have really great ideas and they're not afraid to share them. So many people are afraid to share ideas and they sit on them because they don't want to be judged or look like they don't know what they're doing. Millennials, think about young women who are going into the workforce, who have grown up with all this conversation about Me Too and Time's Up, and they're just like, they're walking in and you know what? They better be entitled to think that I am allowed to have equal pay and I have equal opportunity. I love that they're going in with that attitude, with respect, with dignity. They're not stupid. They can read people. They can read stuff on this stuff really easily. And they can move. They're super, super smart and fast. The millennials that work with me, they're in before me sometimes. They're responding to me on the weekends because their phone is in their hand a lot. So they're like, I'll just take care of that now. So they are probably what makes Indieflix great.
Yeah. And so they're working outside of regular office hours because that's just, they're tuned in anyway.
Yeah.
On their phone.
And maybe I just hired the right people, you know?
Yeah.
They're not sitting there playing on Facebook. That's what you do when you're 13 and 14. That's not what you do when you're 19 and 20. They're over that. They're already over it. They're not, sure, they might do a few Snapchats back, but they're not doing all the other stuff. Like they're actually working and they research really fast and they can throw something together and they've got all these apps to make little commercials. And you're like, how'd you do that? And you're like, oh, there's this app. You just push that and you're done in 30 seconds. You're like, oh, wow, like unbelievable.
Yeah. I think they're teaching us a lot, perhaps even more than we're teaching them. But it might be a slight overstatement, but they're valuable. And I think they're underappreciated.
Yeah.
And I think they're unfairly maligned for this. Even the term millennial, like if you say, is that a negative or a positive connotation? Most people are going to say, oh, millennials.
Yeah.
They're just, they don't get it, or they've entitled the entitlement culture. Yeah. But I'm glad that you're seeing it like that.
But they're also coming into like having the checks, the credit cards, and they're paying for things. And they care about transparency. They care about brands that care about people, that care about our planet, that care about future. And so they are going to hold society accountable. Yeah.
And do you find that I'm not sure how to ask this question, but do you find that there's a certain sense of unattainability that they have when it comes to the wealth that was available in the 80s and 90s and 2000s? That does not seem to be, from their perspective, attainable anymore. They're not even fooling themselves. So that I don't think
they want it. I think, I don't think that that's important to them. I think what's important to them is experiential. I think with the, Airbnb, even though I know that's going to go through a rough comeback, but just the home sharing economy, the car sharing economy, the fact that you can work remote that you can like experience the world and cultures and people and create family and home in many places around the world and feel connected. I think that is a rich life, not having a bunch of stuff that you have to continually figure out how to pay for.
They're redefining
wealth and affluence. And I mean, think about people who just have the big fat house and a whole bunch of cars and stuff, and that's it. And then you think about the person who's traveling the world, knows some fabulous people, have had amazing experiences, doing multiple things. I think kids are going to have, 4 or 5 careers, of which like 2 or 3 haven't even been created yet. So what's the one skill set they should have to be able to fulfill those other jobs? And I've always thought it should be storytelling, communication.
Yeah.
In whatever form, whether it's through coding, whether it's through film, whether it's through music, whether it's through writing, or AI, VR, whatever it is. How do we communicate feeling and story and something that connects us, something that makes us feel like we belong?
That's profound. Yeah, storytelling is ironically, I think storytelling is one of the things that has fallen to the wayside in education and with the arts.
Mm-hmm.
And I was talking about Company 7. I don't know if you remember an arts company from grade school called Company 7. Do you remember that?
No.
They would go into schools and they would paint and do charades and drama and all kinds of arts things. But I had that in grade school, and I don't remember my kids having those types of experiences. And it seems like every generation, the arts gets cut even further.
Yeah.
And so this, how do you learn how to tell stories, or even what a story is? And, it's one thing to like be assigned to read a Shakespeare play in high school, which everybody kind of grinds through, and, but to actually be a part of a storytelling curriculum would be really cool to see in our schools.
Yeah. And marketing, which ties right into storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Why are people not learning marketing? Like, I just feel like even when I talk to filmmakers, I'm like, okay, you got to market your film. Like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, you know how to make a movie. You know how to tell a story. You can market.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to know SEO and all that other stuff like that. That's different. That's sort of the technical stuff. But to learn how to market your movie, why should people watch it? Why did you make it? Who did you make it for? Identify your audience. Break it down. Where does that audience live? What do they like? What do they eat? What do they care about? Infiltrate that, pitch your story to those people, speak their language. And, it's like, what? No, I'm just a filmmaker. It's like, you've got the tools. You've got the skill set already. You just now have to apply it, and it takes a little effort.
Now, we know that you did not go through film school. You dropped out of your political science program and kind of found your path in a unique way, very organically, it sounds like. But what do you, like if a 18-year-old high school senior comes to you and says, hey, I want to be a storyteller and I think I want to do this through film, would you advise film school as a path?
The best thing about film school is that you get to create your tribe, a network. You start building a network. And I think that that's what all industries are kind of based on that, right? Like how you get a job and how you move up and who your people are. But I think in film in particular, because in the early days, most people didn't go to film school. They just showed up in Hollywood and they were waiting tables and either going to be trying to be an actor, producer, grip, electric, whatever it is, until they got on something. And then once you get on that first thing, you start to go on to something else and then something else. And all of a sudden you've got a resume, and suddenly you get calls and you're not sure and you're in the union and whatever. Or you get on a series. Series are the best. I did 3 series. So you ran for 7 years. So you can do other things in between. If you want to know the history of film, you don't need to go to film school to learn how to operate equipment. You can learn that. Go be a PA, make little films. Nowadays you can make a movie with this. It's not the equipment. It's your ability to tell a story. So some people, I think film school is great. Other people, I don't think it's necessary. I think learning on the fly and in the moment, I think is really powerful. And you are oftentimes paid to do it, even if it's just crap pay for your whole life, for that period of time.
Yeah.
But you're building your network. And from there, it's easier to get to the next thing, which makes it easier to get to the next thing. And if you want to direct, go be an assistant to a director, be a production assistant, learn how it all happens, be on set, be in the editing room. If you want to be a producer, be a producer's assistant, work as a production assistant, put your fingers in everything and go the path where you're going to be at the beginning, the middle, and the end, but you're not sitting in the editing room. Because I think producers' path and directors' path have different paths. And then they start to blend over on the other side.
Yeah. And that's their film school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
and
doing
you're being
it.
paid to do it, and
Yeah.
you're getting trusted, and you're building a network, and you're in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's always important to be writing. Write a poem, write a lyric, write a tagline, practice writing. The beautiful thing is the kids are writing, whether it's a tweet, a Facebook post, an Instagram post, a Snapchat, and they're putting images to it, and now they're putting video to it, and they're adding animation, and they're putting titles and music, and they're creating on the fly like this. It's like no brainer for them.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Writing, I think, is another, if I was going to give advice to young people, it would be, write well or communicate well.
Yeah.
That really is part of the storytelling. I mean, if you're going to be a good storyteller, you have to be able to write.
Yes.
And you have to
be able to write for anything, I think. Unless,
right.
I mean, sure, bagging groceries, you don't need to know how to write. But wouldn't it be nice if when you go home after bagging groceries, you can at least write about your day in a journal or something? It's another way to express ourselves. I also think no matter what we do in life, we have to continue to nurture connection with ourselves in order to continue to thrive and to keep our mental health in balance. And I think actually film school is probably really good for people who kind of want to take the path of, oh, I don't want to just go out and make stuff, right? I actually want to know who I am as a filmmaker, who I am as a storyteller. And I want to learn by looking at other people really in depth from people who are super knowledgeable. And I want to take that path. So I think it just depends on who you are.
If you need that structure.
Yeah.
And you got the cash.
You got the cash and you've got the time and you've got the patience.
Yeah.
I find a lot of kids are like, I want to be a filmmaker. And what do I do right now? How do I do that? And I do always say, you should probably move to Hollywood because it really helps to be down there. I think we think, as much as I would like to promote Seattle as the place you should come, the reality is that making movies and being in the film industry is not all that glamorous. And it's a lot of work and a lot of long hours. And I think it's really important that kids know that people know that.
You experience that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were there for 26 years, right?
Yeah. Long time. And I have been in, I've been in dirty, muddy ponds with snakes that they had put in it for a low budget Italian feature where I'm sitting there and it's 3 a.m. and I'm so tired. And we're working 6-day weeks and it's just not glamorous.
Yeah. Well, that's certainly paying your dues.
Oh yeah. I've done it all.
Yeah. Well, good advice. I like getting practical advice from the people I talk to on the podcast because I think that's why people, my listeners, listen. Is they're looking for the how-tos and being in Los Angeles. I've heard that from other guests as well. It helps. It's not everything, but it definitely helps to be there for networking and also getting a sense for how unglamorous it is. It sounds like.
Film festivals. I highly recommend everyone go to film festivals. Because it's not like going to the movies. You go to the movies with a community of people that actually want to talk about what you just watched. And oftentimes the filmmaker's there. And this COVID-19 thing I love how everyone is sort of quickly segueing to online screenings and chatting Q&As and stuff. But it isn't the same.
No.
But it's great for now.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I go to Sundance as often as I can. Is being in that audience and listening to the Q&As or participating in the Q&As. There's no other way to do that, to connect with filmmakers like that. And even if you don't ask any questions, you're just absorbing and watching it. These are human beings that are part of this creative process. And it's a very humanizing experience, I think, because it's not, they're there in their regular clothes. They're not glamorous usually. And so you see them in a very human way. And they're talking about their creative process. And it's hard work. They've usually been at this for years by the time they hit the stage. And so you see what goes into it.
Yeah.
And I love that part of it. And also when you do see the stars too, you see that they're just regular people.
Mm-hmm.
You get to hear their perspective on, why they chose to do this independent film. And they're storytellers too.
Well, and you can also chat them up, just seeing them around the festival too, or just anybody. You can talk film with people. In fact, it's funny when I've been to Sundance 17 years or something, and I always seem to meet the people I'm supposed to meet in line for the bathroom. It's a mixing of everyone. There's no levels so much. I should take that back because when they had the gifting suites and they were everywhere. And you could only get in if you were on a list, and then they give you these big bags of stuff that everybody. Of course, we all want that stuff.
Yeah.
We want to be on that list. That kind of segregated people a little bit because they'd go into these gifting suites where you could like get your makeup done, get your hair done, get a little massage, get this goodie bag, whatever, try some stuff on for free. And then that would take their whole afternoon. So they weren't out in the restaurants. They weren't out on the streets. When Sundance kind of put the kibosh on that, suddenly they were out in droves and they were out in the restaurants and they were out on the streets, and you could bump into people and take photos with them and talk to them about their art. And they were so grateful to be able to talk to people.
Yeah. That's the coolest part about Sundance for me is how accessible it is.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be up close with people that we mythologize mostly.
Yeah.
But they're not mythological figures. They're just regular people. I just hope that the festival circuit is able to stay viable after this COVID situation. That would be really sad. I know South by Southwest went online this year. And
how was that? Do you know?
I have not participated in it yet, but I'm going to try to connect with some filmmakers through that.
Well, SIF canceled.
Festival. SIF canceled. And you're a big part of SIF, aren't you?
I've been, there are years that I've been really big, whether I was a juror or a sponsor or a filmmaker. We had my first feature film was at SIF, but it overlaps with Cannes. So I had to start kind of doing every other year. Cannes sort of became a sweet spot for me. I was one of the first female Americans to participate on a European panel and for streaming services. This was a long time ago. And so I have done quite a bit of stuff over there as well. And so that was always an overlap. And then as I started to get into making angst and getting involved with, and showing them in sort of the international schools and then kind of crossing over into other organizations in Hong Kong and China, I was suddenly over there. I was at their first mental health summit in Shenzhen, showing a rough cut of angst.
Oh, wow.
At the second largest convention center in the country. And that was pretty trippy. But that wasn't during SIF. That was during Sundance. That was the first time I missed Sundance.
Oh.
And it felt really weird, like, oh, something's wrong with this. But then I went over there and it was amazing. And then I'm sort of like, how did I get here? But movies are powerful. Movies can heal. Movies bring us together. Movies, I always think music and movies are the most powerful mediums on the planet. And, when you can show a movie to 2,000, or in some instances, we'll hit a school and hit 13,000 students, like in 2 weeks. When we do that, suddenly it's like, wow, we've just reached a lot of people and had a lot of conversation really fast.
Making an impact.
Yeah. And then we have all these materials we leave behind too to keep the conversation going. And then we can measure our impact. So we're actually seeing that we are having an impact. So
do you know if SIF is going to be online this year, or are they just canceled completely?
No, I think they're completely canceled.
Oh, that's so sad.
I know.
Yeah. I just started getting into SIF last year.
It's a long one, 25 days.
Yeah. Yeah. But it seems to be one of the more accessible festivals.
Mm-hmm.
That you can get tickets.
Yeah. I think what has always, because I go to Toronto, SIF, Cannes, Sundance, and sometimes I'll go to some other, smaller ones as well. But like Toronto and Sundance and Cannes are so sure, there's lots of other places you can go to watch things, but it's very close together. So like it's crowded, you feel people, it's not very COVID-19 friendly.
No.
But it's community.
Yeah.
And SIF is more spread out. So SIF might actually do well during COVID-19 other than the theater experience. But still, it's like, it's pretty much like, Seattle Center has it, but then it's at downtown, Renton, Everett, Snohomish. Like it's spread out because it's bringing the festival to the people, which I love. But you kind of, the community's feel is a little different. It
is. I remember at Sundance, I'm mostly at Eccles Theater when I'm at Sundance, which is the main where the red carpet premieres are. And if you're at Eccles, you do see, you're in line with, I met Kenneth Turan, the Los Angeles Times film critic, in line there.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of like, wow, this is so cool. And it's very tight knit, literally tight knit. I mean, you're just in these really cramped lines, eating this really bad food. I thought I was going to be eating a bunch of great food in
No, but the
Park
shuttle
City.
Service is excellent.
The shuttle service is great. Yeah. The Ubers were a little bit outrageous.
Oh, ridiculous.
Yeah. What projects are you working on that might be coming out in the next few months that you're excited about? So
I do have a new movie coming out too, actually. One I directed called The Upstanders, which is about, it started off as being about bullying and cyberbullying. I was bullied as a kid, so it was one very close to my heart. And it ended up being more about resilience and attention and connection and community so that we can feel like we belong. Because if we felt like we belonged and we mattered, we might not hurt each other so much.
Yeah.
So that one took me down a very different path, and I learned so much.
I watched it, by the way.
Oh,
excellent.
Did you like it?
It was great.
We're still working on it, by the way.
Yeah.
We're still doing the music, and I still haven't quite 100% locked picture. And then I have another one that I executive produced called Nevertheless, which is about kind of looking at sort of the layers behind Me Too and Time's Up and addressing sexual harassment. And that one is fascinating. And I worked with the director, Sarah Moshman, who did a fabulous job of it's a really complex conversation to have. She did a great job of kind of boiling it down to consumable bites. We're all in this, and it's going to take all of us to make change. But there is a path forward, and there's a lot of hope. So I'm really proud of that film as well. It's funny to be taking films out in the middle of a pandemic because nobody, either they want dumbed down TV or feel good. And so, to watch something about sexual harassment or cyberbullying, it's just kind of like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that. But angst and are definitely brimming right now because people are like, oh my God, we're living on our devices every second of the day. How do we find balance? Or with anxiety and angst, it's it's never been higher because of the pandemic. So how can we help ourselves? How can we help our families, our colleagues and friends? So those films are doing great. And we're doing the online community experience now. So I've taken all of our offline experiences. So now we do live webinar screenings with Q&As and all sorts of fun stuff. And we just started them and they are unbelievable. You still get that community, jolt of connection, that feeling in your heart and in your brain. I didn't know that that would work. I was like, we got to do something. It's unbelievable. The connection that's there and the enthusiasm and people are typing and talking. And it was really cool.
Well, the Nevertheless is the one that I was not able to watch. So
right.
If I could ask Natalie for a renewed link on that, I'd love to see the screener or participate in one of those live Q&A things too.
Would love that.
Yeah.
We also, if anybody wants to learn about any of the films that are just available through the special screenings, as opposed to they're not on Indieflix.com, because they're think of it like they're doing their theatrical release. So they're held back to just playing theaters or communities. You can find it at indieflix.com/edu.
Okay.
And those are all of our sort of social impact tentpole films.
So where can people find you online in social media?
I'm Indieflix CEO on everything.
Okay.
Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, we had a little issue, but that wasn't my go-to first. I'm working on that one. And then Facebook and LinkedIn.
And where are you most active on social media?
Probably Instagram, a little bit of Facebook. And I really love LinkedIn too. I love keeping up with everybody on a business front.
Yeah, we just connected. Thank you for accepting my request. Sheila, it was really fun talking to you. Thanks for making time for me in your office in your lovely Lakeview.
So nice to see another human being in person that I'm not just brushing by really fast.
Yeah. All right. It was great talking to you, Sheila.
Thanks, Brian.
Hey, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If so, I have a favor to ask. Can you go to wherever you listen to podcasts and leave me a review? Your feedback is what keeps this podcast going. You can also check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the handle @DreampathPod. And as always, go find your dream path.